Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, where the art and science of operational excellence come to life through captivating stories of triumph, challenge, and transformation from the front lines of industry. Our distinguished guests, from manufacturing pioneers and medical device innovators to aerospace visionaries, diagnostic lab leaders, and major capital project leaders, unveil the hidden patterns and powerful insights that drive exceptional results in the complex world of operations. Join us on this journey of discovery as we explore the brilliant minds behind the systems that make our world work and uncover the leadership secrets that could revolutionize your approach to operations forever. Here is your host, Ed Pound.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode of the Operations Science Podcast. Our guest is a dynamic leader in supply chain and operations who ensures that lenses, the very polycarbonate lenses many of us wear every day, make their way reliably from suppliers across Asia to customers throughout Africa. She manages complex supply chains with precision, balancing suppliers, production plants, and customer needs across South Africa and beyond. Recently, she's taken on the exciting challenge of supporting a new plant in Mauritius, expanding her leadership even further. Please join me in welcoming to the podcast, Silindile Sitole. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Edward?
Oh, I'm doing great. Looking forward to the conversation. So let's jump right in. What are the biggest challenges you face when working with suppliers from Asia and managing freight methods with those suppliers?
I would say the first biggest challenge is we are 5 hours behind. So when we enter the office, they're already knocking off essentially. So they have to have additional hours. In my first year, I found the language barrier was a bit tricky and managing the expectations to align it with ours.
Well, give an example of those expectations where yours were different than theirs were.
So I would say what our order quantities would be. I would say one of our suppliers would be partial delivery. And this could lead to critical low stock levels. And just managing or requesting them to deliver on time was quite a challenge because we're not the only entity they supply. So I think that was one of the challenges where it was our expectation and where the customer is now requiring that stock. And we don't have an actual answer as to when we'll receive it. We can only give an estimated time. So that was quite a big challenge. However, after 2 years, I think we've fully aligned and we've managed to gather the information we need and their requirements and give them a correct, accurate forecasting. And then with the freight methods, we moved from air freight to sea freight. The reason being is polycarbonate lenses are generally low cost or low value. And the landed cost when using air freight became quite high. So just as a cost saving method, we then moved over to bulk ordering and shipping via sea freight. And unfortunately, again, in my first year, another challenge was an instance where our Durban port, which is one of our biggest ports, had challenges of striking employees, failures. This resulted in an additional 2-3 weeks lead time added to our logistical requirements. And obviously, we weren't sure as to how long this would take for the 3 challenges we had.
We talked about this in our preliminary conversations. And so the response in that particular case was, if I recall correctly, you started using air freight where you would have used normally sea freight. Is that right?
Yes. So we had to obviously order now emergency stock just to assist with the gap that we were experiencing. And the business would take the knock on the additional landed cost. However, this was quite helpful to the business. So we would have to order those minimal stock just to air freight it, just so that the customer could receive what they needed and production could fulfill their needs.
So I imagine, though, so did the customers understand the situation and what you did for them, and were they appreciative of that, or did they just not even notice?
Luckily, we didn't lose any customers in that time frame because as an operations team, we work closely and we would meet every week. We would report from the logistics point, when would I expect a shipment, when would the order be delivered, And if there was any form of back order, we implemented a back order system where the customer service team would be informed on that day what has been placed on back order, and then they would inform the customer or make an informed decision at that point what they need to do on the next step. So there was clear communication from beginning till end.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's so important to then communicate clearly. I mean, sometimes you're going to have back orders. The worst thing though, as a customer, is you don't find out about it until 2 weeks later. So when you found out, so when you would put something on back order, was it due that day and you notified the customer, or you just knew it was going to be on back order and you gave the customer some advance notice, or a mix of both?
It would be generally on that day, and then the customer would be informed. Unfortunately, their expectation would be not met based on the service delivery. However, I think they were quite appreciative that we informed them in time. And generally, when they would get a question as to when can we expect the stock, we would have some form of an answer and the expectation on when we'll receive, and when that stock would arrive, it would be prioritized first, regardless of what is waiting in the receiving bit area. We would prioritize that stock.
Okay. Let me back up a little bit for the audience, if you would. Describe the products your company makes and what your role is in managing those with the customers.
Like you said in the introduction, we manage we manufacture or produce polycarbonate lenses. We order from the Asian suppliers and some French suppliers. We order semi-finished blanks, which actually go through the production phases where they cut and add any value-added services to it, whether coating it or tinting, if you want to add a different, like a sunglass. And they can even edge them, which essentially give them the shape that needs to fit in the frame, to the point where if the customer requires, then they can fit them in that specific frame. We don't limit ourselves to any form of frame. We even do safety frames, which is used in any production or mining purposes. And also we do supply finished lenses. So they come already cut in a thin base, or depending on how the prescription is. And that can also have some value add specific lens, or we just send it to the customer as is, as we receive it in the warehouse. My role is purely to ensure that we manage keep the right stock levels. Firstly, we order based on retaining a certain minimum maximum level, and to ensure that we do not actually get too close to the safety stock levels. We look at historic consumption. That historic consumption that we monitor weekly, we also report to the various stakeholders in the business, all the way to the actual head office, which is in Amir, in France. And my role is purely just to ensure that we order the right quantities. We don't over order or under order. Those orders are actually sent out to the suppliers on time, twice a month. And we use a master replenishment planning system, an MRP system, which is Microsoft D365, that processes the orders. I don't have to manually input each and every line. So when I work on the minimum and maximum levels that we require, which we update bi-weekly or monthly, we then have planned orders that is inputted into the system, and that is sent either to our in-group suppliers or out-of-group suppliers. And we work with the central planning team in Thailand, who essentially then the customer services team there distributes the orders respectively to the relevant suppliers who are in group. It communicates after that when the stock levels or the stock is ready. They then communicate with myself as to engage with the relevant freight forwarders, or they'll inform me that the order is ready, what method should we ship it? And we know which lanes are allocated to specific forwarders, and those forwarders are commonly contacted, and then they ship, and we monitor. We know that sea freight takes about 3 months from ordering, including the freight. From ordering 3 months, including production at the supplier. And with air freight, it's generally about 6 weeks.
Okay. All right. So I wear prescription glasses, right? And I've got these lenses. Mine are graduated lenses. And I think the way you described it to me is you guys don't do the prescription, the optics of the lens, but once that's done, you do everything else that somebody might want. Is that
Correct. So we actually go by what the optometrist or the customer has requested for their specific patient. We don't add any prescription. We order base. Well, the finished lenses might have, because it's digital, we work on base, not necessarily the prescription at hand. So they might add some workings on it in the production facility because of the base. But the finished lens,
in your production facility?
yes, within our production facility. When it's the semi-finished, so it's not a complete lens, they still have some work on it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you mentioned, well, you now have the plant Mauritius. You're in South Africa. Mauritius is an island nation off the east coast of Africa. Are you pooling inventory? How are you managing those two different sources of inventory?
So I work closely with the operations manager there and the commercial team. I'm purely meant to assist them on the supply chains ends of it. I've never actually been there physically, so everything is a Teams meeting. They're also, I think, a bit ahead of us. I think about 2 hours ahead when it comes to time zone, and I must ensure a system where they have loopholes, where they have issues. Essentially, they order from one of our in-group customers based in Dubai, Osmi, who's like a 3PL. And that Osmi group actually orders the product for them specifically. So they don't engage with the supplier directly. They already have someone. And unfortunately, I don't interfere with Osmi. But whatever budget requirements they may have relating to distribution, helping them understand, because essentially they just new to the Isolo family.
So that's an interesting dynamic. Whenever you're bringing in a new organization, new people, essentially you have to reform the team. So and you have what, 10 or 11 years experience in industry, is that right? So you've now, you're not a rookie anymore. You've got a lot of good experience. I'm sure a lot of good scars, learning scars, as we all do. What is your practice in terms of integrating with a new team and making sure that you ensure that things get done as they should be done?
I always like to get an understanding of where they stand, what they understand, and what then get their needs. Because, like I think I did mention, we have a head of supply chain sitting in Dubai, and they manage the Meta region. So this is the individual who actually said to me, "You need to manage the supply chain system for Mauritius." And they've also had a few challenges where a lady who was working there for odd years, a lot of years, decided to leave, and then they got a new individual. So it's like now you have to teach some aspects of the business. And I think also their leads can speak French. I don't. So they can speak directly to what I would say my head of supply chain. And just the easiest thing for me I found was to understand what they don't know firstly.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, I think really, everybody jumps in and they want to say, "Oh, here's what you should know." First thing is to understand, what do they know and what are they trying to do? That's actually a great insight.
And the biggest challenge is also their systems don't match with ours. So they don't use the same system we use with the rest of the company. And it's been quite a challenge, because when it comes to the reporting requirements and getting that information, it's like there's an additional lead time added or a few challenges relating to that, because we work on what they call OPC codes that draw for each clothes family, etc. So they just work on clothes, and they're very small compared to ourselves in South Africa and generally every other entity in the world that falls under Isolo. So it's still a learning curve daily for us, I would say. So the teething aspects are still there, but we meet on a weekly basis with them to understand what their requirements are and what is needed based on the meetings we have monthly, and with the general operations head of supply chain team, and then bringing it down to our weekly understanding.
So along those lines, in sort of a similar vein, what are the key performance indicators and reports that you use to make sure that things are running like they should be running?
The first one is I need to pull a weekly report literally every week, every Monday, indicating what the total inventory levels are. We have 3 branches in South Africa. Unfortunately, we haven't aligned that to the Mauritius branch or lab due to, like I said, the system differences, but that is a work in progress.
I just said it will take time. Yes.
And then after looking at the inventory levels, that also gives us indication of what our monthly coverage is or stock coverage is. So we have a KPI of maintaining anything between 3 to 5 months of coverage for our stock. It then gives us an indication of what our weekly usage is, what the service rate was for the month, based on not the production or the production items, but the finished lenses, and what we have also where customers order more than 2 pairs of lenses, we call them bulk orders. And we look at the performance on that side of how long it took from the day of the customer ordering versus the scheduled date of sending it out. And then we also look at the back orders, what the number of pieces we have, what the critical level is, and where that supplier, which supplier it comes from, what the specific product is, and when we expect to receive it on which purchase order we've placed. We also look at what we call SKU products with zero inventory, KPI, which says nothing more than 1%. The moment I reach 1%, it's a red flag for me. So I need to ensure that that's below, which means then my safety stock or stock attack is below 5%. So we report on this weekly. And in this also, we have a monthly report that we pull where we manage also our unhealthy stock levels. With unhealthy stock levels, it also helps us to basically gauge what is needing to be slobbed, what is obsolete, what is slow moving. It also helps us budget and for the following year what we shouldn't order, what our high performers are, what our low runners are. This is essentially where it shows, and we show all the stakeholders, the relevant stakeholders, what we shouldn't have and what we should have. Yes, essentially. And then
So you're looking. Do you look at average back order time? So when something is back ordered, how long it's on back order? You track that.
we do track that. So if something starts to be on back order for more than essentially a week or two, that's a key indication that now we need to ask the supplier, what is happening? We should have received this. I mean, most of it is generally the air freighted products. In the recent time, we had one of our most popular items for production purposes, actually the biggest production lens. We had 2 orders sitting on sea. And this was purely a forwarder's issue. It was purely the fact that they shipped it out late and it just didn't receive. And then we had clearing issues because they decided to change the clearing agent. So it's been quite a challenge there. This helped us communicate and engage with the production manager and customer services. This is what's happening. Unfortunately, we had an incident where the products are actually put on back order when they shouldn't be. So those products, we don't put them on back order. What they do is generally they call it a base change because it's a bigger lens. They can move it from one base to another. Or inform the customer if they maybe would prefer going offshore, where then we have a facility in Thailand that produces the lens and brings it as a finished product for us.
Okay, so how many items do you stock? How many SKUs do you have that you stock? Is it like 10 or 20, or is it 200 or 1,000? Or
You're looking about in total, wow, because we go by the OPC, so it could be over 50,000.
oh, 50,000. Okay, wow.
Because they're unique to each power, each lens. So it could definitely be over 50,000. I mean, on average, by year end, we're holding about 480,000 lenses in our warehouse.
Okay. Well, that's a lot. I mean, we've worked with clients that have 100,000, right? Which is, I think, was the extreme, but 50,000 is a lot. That's a lot to order. So, but how many of those though? What do you? So that would be 50,000 would be maybe what you sell, but you might stock like a base level of that, right? So do you guys stock stuff that are I would call them well, you mentioned it, semi-finished goods, and then those go into one of the 50,000. So how many of the base level do you stock, or do I have that wrong?
When I look at the top level flow code itself, you'll be surprised that one flow code could have about 20 SKUs in it. So when I actually look at our current and the new products, if I would say off the top of my head, you're not even looking at not even 50. They're quite small. You look at the actual list, the way it branches out, it expands more, but the actual main code itself is less than it's 50, not 50,000, but 50.
Sure, sure. And that's, that's very common. We see that at the Operations Science Institute when we're working with clients. And what we see a lot happen is that because there is a lot of complexity at the finished goods level, as you mentioned, 50,000 products, people sometimes can get lost in the complexity. But as you pointed out, I mean, if you only have a couple of order magnitude smaller number of base products, then really it's a lot easier to manage. So yeah, managing inventory on 50,000 parts would be difficult. Managing 50 is not so much. So how do you collaborate with your production teams to align your capacity with your stock availability to meet customer demand?
So we're still working on what we call an operations and forecasting module that was implemented last year, but we finally got aligned halfway through it this year. And it shows basically a key indicator for each workshop in the production team. So I'm meant to work with the production team, the continuous improvement specialist, and essentially the warehouse stockroom manager, that whatever we have stock-wise, does it meet the requirements for production firstly? And over and above that, whatever's been planned or order entry for that week, because we have to put it or work on it every week, is essentially going to be sufficient, or are they going to have sufficient capacity in each workshop? So this gives a bit of a gauge of whether they should maybe move certain orders offshore, or if they maybe work on shifting individuals in the specific production team to other departments who can, so that they meet the necessary capacity. Because we look at each, like I said, there's a coating department, there's a tinting department, there's a surfacing department, there's a edging department and a mounting department. And if we see that maybe the capacity there, because it gives us a key indicator, either is normal green or just a red. The moment it's black, that means the capacity is over and above what is the specific department can handle. So they've done time studies to indicate what the capacity per department is, and that's what the continuous improvement specialist needs to do. And essentially, I need to ensure that, because the production team needs about 2,000 lenses, good lenses, that's what they produce in a day.
Okay. That's through all of those departments you mentioned, like coating and shaping or whatever, or is it just
production, just the surfacing, the cutting phase, the actual, they do 2,000, then each department has their own target, which is, I think coating has about 1.9, 1.7, 1,700, somewhere there. So it has been proven, or they've actually studied what each department can handle, and I need to ensure that every single department will receive sufficient stock in time. And if there isn't enough, then I need to inform them well in time so that they can make plans. I mean, we do have some departments that require test lenses, and based on consumption, we've discovered that they need more than what we've been ordering historically. So when we calculated the min-max, we looked at the consumption, and we just increased it slightly more to put it for the month or the couple of months that this is how much range we need. So this was a collaboration with the production manager, with the stockroom manager, with the relevant team leaders. And yes, it really became beneficial. So that's how we actually, communication, like I said.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and communication on capacity. I mean, in operations science, it's the fundamental buffer that you have to manage. If you overschedule capacity, all bets are off. You're just not you just descend into firefighting and expediting and all of that. So it's good to hear that you guys communicate closely on capacity. Now, when you said the production needed more than you were providing for testing, so I'm thinking that means when they first start a production run, they use a few lenses to make sure that they have the process dialed in, first article inspection type of.
So every morning, in the surfacing, they call them surfacing department, they do what they call calibrations, lenses for that. And in the coating departments, they have 10 test lenses. Similar lenses are used in the cutting, edging departments. And what they generally use is about 90 lenses a day in the coating department. This is calibration and testing that they're coating the right way, or the chemicals that they've mixed in the coating department actually are the right formula. And so this they get from us. And historically, we're ordering about 2,000, but we see that we had to increase it to about 3,000 some odd lenses.
Okay. And are you working with your finance people, or are they always breathing down your neck to make sure you have less inventory and balancing that? How does that work?
Actually, the finance team actually doesn't breathe down my neck. Historically, they used to before I joined, but because I started requesting from them SLOB, we call it SLOB, the obsolete slow moving calculation, would give me, and then the UHS file we pull monthly on our side. Basically, we look at both files and gauge what needs to be removed and what actually we should have. So we can have excess healthy quantity of stock in there. We do have a peak season where it's a summer promotion. Yes, we have a summer promotion. One of our biggest customers has a get a frame or a lens, get a test done, frame, and you get a sunglass for free. Yes, so that's around November, December, January, February. So we have an understanding, and I think we've managed to keep good stock holding, such that the finance team doesn't breathe down our necks. So they're quite happy.
It sounds like you've established credibility. So now they know they can trust what you're doing, and you're working for the same goal. So that's a testament to your leadership. That's great. So on a little bit different topic, and one that everybody's talking about today, artificial intelligence. How do you see AI? How are you using it now, or are you using it? Do you have plans to use it? How's that going on in your world?
In our world, currently, we're not using any AI. There's no such plans currently either. However, I do see a future with it. I think just looking at ChatGPT alone has proven to show that it could help in lead time aspects on my sake. In that, when I understand that, I think essentially once you have a trend, and I think AI could also create that, we might have to have more manual or human interference. And this also might actually help with minimizing human mistakes, because anything that has anyone, like I could type something wrong, but AI could actually be more accurate than myself. If I'm ill today, it could still continue tomorrow for me if I'm booked off for some time. So I do see quite a big future for AI in not just my sector or industry, but holistically. Can we trust it 100%? That's still a question.
I can tell you, I will just give you the answer to that one. No, you cannot. I mean, that's actually why humans are not going away, because AI has its own quirks, and I would never trust it. But it's very, very useful. And as a matter of fact, what you mentioned is a common theme that I've heard with when talking with other podcast guests, is that a great benefit for AI is checking and confirming, for instance, version control. That's a very big, it's easy to establish a process, to establish drawings or whatever. It gets very complicated when you're managing version control and you're managing changes or checking for errors. And I think AI shows a lot of promise for something like that. And as I mentioned, that's a common theme that I've heard with other guests. So I'm not surprised to hear it there also. On a little bit different issue, tariffs. Are you having tariffs or regulatory issues? I mean, you're not ordering this, in the States, the big thing is all the tariffs that are going into place. but you're not. That really doesn't influence your market. Do you have any other tariff or regulatory issues you're dealing with?
I think the only concern that we as Africans have is just the AGOA, like not being implemented potentially.
Wait, I'm sorry. What not being implemented?
The AGOA.
AGOA. Okay.
How do I explain? It's essentially the agreement that America and Africa had when we import, I think, to America, but we don't import into America. We don't really. I think we only have a few items that we export from America. We don't have issues from there. I think it's from Texas, a company called DAC Vision.
Well, good for you. You don't have to worry about all the craziness. So that's good.
We don't have challenges relating to terrorists. I think our biggest challenge is when we're exporting into Africa because we don't really, on our Incoterms, when we're shipping into Africa, we don't ship all the way to the customer directly. We have to hand over to their brokers. And there's sometimes issues between that the brokers receiving, and then they will have their challenges, and it sometimes comes back to us. However, Incoterms do state that if I ship DAP, which is what we do, which is delivered at place, and we indicate the place, it sort of gives the risk away from us. But we don't have that issue. I think when
on that shipment mode, is that something the customer selects or you select, or that's a negotiation when they order? How does that work?
We work with a foundation called OneSight that does the philanthropy business, and they have clinics who order from us. And that is their requirement as OneSight for their customers, that the customers tend to prefer their own brokers because they have certain rates that they've negotiated. Most of the African company customers that we have generally don't want to use our last mile courier companies because it tends to be more expensive, and they, as maybe a group, can get a better rate from utilizing their own. So we can only send something to a certain, maybe the airport, and then they need to take over from there. I think one of the challenges we found is there's always a gap somewhere. Maybe the parcel goes missing, or there was maybe an incorrect name put on the parcel or the invoice, and it was delivered to the wrong person. And then it comes back to us. And then it's a whole investigation, and generally find out a month later.
Right. So your end customers, is that actually the customer who ordered the glasses? Or are you sending to the optometrist who did the prescription for the customer, or is it both? Or what is your end customer? Who is your end customer?
So our end customer is actually the optometrist. We don't engage with the actual customer or the patient. We work with purely the optometrist or any clinics that might be ordering from us.
Got it. Okay. So looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest opportunities to improve efficiency or agility or resilience in your operations? Anything stand out?
I wish I could shorten the lead time, essentially, from the inbound side. If I could, I would get better rates, rather use F rates. It's faster, keep lower stock holding. I mean, the flow process. However, I work with what I have. I don't foresee any changes currently, maybe system changes that might improve in our company. But I will say that the head of supply chain has come up with great ideas to just streamline and change the way we conduct ourselves and work, and make it simply one unified version for all regions in the Meta region. I would love to collaborate more with my counterparts in Africa, in Turkey, and Middle East, and just understand how their customer bases and how they manage their challenges, and try and implement it here, and maybe gauge how they handle, because I'm not the only supply chain manager who has to manage a different lab in a different country. Yeah, so essentially that's about it. But I think,
well, let me just throw this question out there, because obviously lead times is a big issue. Is there any thought of establishing your own capacity in South Africa for producing the semi-finished product?
I don't think we have the right. I mean, it's not the first time I've heard this question. I was actually engaging with ex-colleague of mine, a friend of mine who's very into this innovative. He's now like self-employed, and he's trying to find different methods to improve supply chain processes wherever he can. He's done it currently in the meat industry. And he asked this very same question. And he started looking for a company that could produce those specific polycarbonate lenses in South Africa. But I don't think there's any, I mean, we could possibly,
Right. It's an option.
but there's no, currently, I haven't heard any word. It's a great idea. I think it would, because then that would actually minimize lead times. It would be a purely South African product. Transportation costs would be almost three quarters down because it's sea freight, air freight. We wouldn't have packaging issues, and I think we could look at it on the consumable side, because we don't only I think our biggest challenge this also was because we use consumables in the production facility, and it's been quite a challenge getting them into South Africa, and we have been wishing that someone could produce them locally. So there's different aspects.
Yeah, well, it'll take somebody who's got the capital investment wherewithal, and obviously you have to have the skill set. But those are the things to consider. A great analog is in fashion is a company called Zara, and I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but what they did was, rather than ordering fashion, whatever the latest dress is or scarf, 6 months ahead of time, and then having a bunch of inventory that doesn't sell, they actually located capacity close, or have located capacity close to their market. So it's more expensive, but they can respond much more quickly. And that's just in operations science, we call that reconfiguring your portfolio of buffers. But so that's always an option, but it's a longer term one. Let's switch focus here and find out about a little bit about you. Where did you grow up, and when you were young, what influenced you that maybe led you to working in supply chain where you are today?
So I grew up in a small township called Esikhaweni in KwaZulu-Natal, which is a province in South Africa. It's a coastal province. I'm Zulu by, I wouldn't say national, but culture. Is it culture? I speak Zulu native. I am a last born of three children to my mother and father. And my mom is still alive. My dad is still alive. My eldest sister, unfortunately, passed away when she was 2 months old. So none of us actually met her. And then I have an older brother. I'm a mother to three kids, and I'm married to not a Zulu man, but a Zimbabwean man. So I studied at an all-girls school back in KZN called St. Catherine's. And after completing, I went to a different province in Gauteng and Pretoria, and I studied internal auditing. So yes, a bachelor's in commercial in internal auditing at the University of Pretoria. And this is where the story changed, because all my life, essentially, when I was in high school, I wanted to go into accounting, chartered accountant, and that obviously didn't happen. I went into internal auditing, and when I finished, and I always tell my story like this, instead of sitting at home, because every country has its challenges, and one of our challenges for the youth is essentially unemployment, where we will graduate but never actually get into the work environment or into our career. So my husband actually is the one who got me into this industry through a very junior job in a supportive role for demand planning. And essentially I've moved up the different aspects after having our first child together, who is my second child, because I had my eldest at a very young age. And essentially, after having my second, the company was planning to retrench in my department. And I was advised apply, and I applied for a role, but I was essentially suggested by the executive of the specific department that I joined the supply chain for the private brand development department as a supply chain coordinator. That's when my actual supply chain roles started. And After 3 years, I went into a different company. So this was in the still FMCG, but I was completely working with perishable food groups.
Okay. Yeah. That's a different industry. Yeah.
Totally different industry. And after leaving there, I went into the tech. So I was importing Apple products. So the likes of iPhones, MacBooks into South Africa. And I started a very junior role even then and moved after 2 months to a more senior role. My supply chain manager saw potential in me, said what I'm doing at that point was not enough. And it was never actually my dream or anything in my childhood to be where I am. However, it's just the never shying away from a challenge, always wanting to learn more that has led me to where I am. So with all my 10 years of experience, I've landed to be a supply chain manager in a totally different industry.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, your inclination for accounting and then auditing, I mean, that goes pretty well with supply chain because, you have to keep track of things and understand how to account for things and plan for things. So did that initial interest, though, going way back, did that come from your parents? Were either one of them accountants or influenced you in that regard?
My mom was a teacher. My dad he was in the insurance sector. So no one was in accounts at all. My mom actually didn't even teach mathematics or she taught science. She taught science, biology. And that led me, I didn't want to be a teacher. Funny enough, when I was a child, I wanted to be a doctor. You know how children, I want to be a doctor. And I want to be a physiotherapist. And then
I want to be an astronaut. Yeah.
exactly. So when I actually did accounting, I think it's because when I got to actually start doing the subjects in high school, that's when I saw I loved it. I loved the math part, no, but the accounting aspect, I loved.
Okay. So if you could go back, the last question, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of career advice, what would that be?
Do what you love, because the moment you have passion, the moment you have drive, you won't feel like you burdened by something. The world is an oyster. Don't just look at, I think growing up, I always thought it was either you're a doctor, an accountant, etc. But there's so much more out there. There's so many careers out there. There's so many options. Do your research, learn, engage, network, and have a business mind too.
So, Silindile, that's a great way to end. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. And I look forward to talking with you in the future.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Edward. It was really a great pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Operation Science podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. Join the Operation Science Institute at opscience.org. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not represent their company's views unless specifically stated as such.